Sure. Welcome everyone to Refreshing the Kubernetes Threat Model. This is Ala Dewberry. I'm Robert Ficcaglia Francesco Beltramini. We're here to talk about our efforts to review the Kubernetes threats and threat models that have been produced in the past and how we're refreshing them. I'll just run through. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just give a brief intro on how we got here. So I was part of the third-party audit effort that just completed recently. And in doing that, we had lots of discussions about previous audits and previous threat models, but there wasn't really a good framework. And there certainly wasn't anything reusable. And there wasn't really much transparency about how these audits and the threat modeling behind that are done. So Francesco, Ala, and others, Rory, Ian, many of us got together and said, it would be good to, one, refresh the models that have been done in the past because, we're a few versions beyond those. And two, it'd be great to come out with a methodology to find and something that is reusable across not only Kubernetes releases and audits, but also for sub-projects and other projects to adopt. So the goal is to show you the methodology we've been vectoring in on. We're happy to take questions on pros and cons of different methodologies. And we'd love to get any of the projects or sub-projects who are here who are interested to come on up or ask questions after and discuss how we can do threat modeling more comprehensively and more often. So with that, I'll let Francesco take it away.
Sure, thanks, Rob. This is a quick shout out to the project that actually inspired the threat model refresh. So maybe a little over a year ago, with a long-term friend of Control Plane, which is my company, Abdullah Garcia is the lead security architect for JPMC. We came up with something called Kubernetes for SOC, which is actually a threat library. And the idea is to support incident responders into, first of all, sit at the design table with other Kubernetes engineers, ask the right questions, and make sure there are no visibility gaps on Kubernetes clusters as they are deployed. See this as almost a checklist based on a lightweight threat model of what needs to be configured on a Kubernetes cluster, self-managed, to put the cluster in defendable position. So that was work that we did together. And then as I joined the effort with Rob and the other guys, said, this could be a starting point to refresh the Kubernetes threat model that required some refreshing indeed. So, by the way, it's open source, so you can get the library by scanning the QR code if you wish. So what are the foundations of building an efficient threat model? Basically, 5. Assumptions, threat actors, threat objects, attack vectors, and controls. Assumptions, a description is foundational premises in a threat model, define the context and boundaries, which is very important to keep it manageable in size, as well as the assumptions that guide threat and vulnerability analysis. Threat actors, equally important. They identify individuals, groups, or entities that may target your organization and target your clusters. They pose potential threats. They have malicious intent. There could be the occasional misconfiguration, but we focus on malicious intent. And then in terms of threat objects, what are those? Items or element at risk. They are subject to potential threats, can be components of both the control plane, but also the data plane, because again, our threat model refresh focuses on self-managed Kubernetes. And attack vectors. They can be used to exploit the weaknesses or vulnerabilities in general, methods or paths used in attacking a cluster. Controls, protective, technical measures implemented to mitigate risk. So to harden the components and make sure those threats, they can try to target the weaknesses, to exploit these weaknesses, but they can't succeed. Or if they do, we can detect it. Right. Back to you for the methodology.
Oh. Well, I think I'd like to maybe ask a few questions about how you came to these assumptions, how you came to the catalog around these threat actors. Like, what was the process that you guys used to initially vet, how to filter in or filter out?
So our firm has 200 plus years combined years of experience in hardening Kubernetes and securing clusters. So basically, a lot of the information came from a field experience. So we identified with customers, as we consult on these customers, those are the objects most targeted by threat actors. These were the threat actors targeting the organizations, and this is how they were supposed to secure those components of Kubernetes to make sure those threats were not threats anymore. So field expertise and research.
So, Ola, I did want to ask you a question, put you on the spot. So you've been leading kind of the self-assessments with at least 2 of the projects. So as you look at a framework, what have been some of the challenges you've seen, and how would this framework help or not in terms of what you've been trying to do with the teams?
Yeah, it really comes down to repeatability and scalability. You know, in SIG security in general, it's really about, you know, we're a non-coding SIG, and it's really about building security muscle and security culture in Kubernetes. And so that really gets down to people and processes that are, or I mean, people, of course, but processes that are accessible, well documented, and things that people with maybe not, you know, a combined 200 years of security experience can actually use, follow, and get to a really great outcome. You know, one thing, Robert, that we've talked about is using, you know, a self-assessment like a lightweight threat model as an input into getting funding for a fuzzing exercise. So also using using this framework to make sure that we're directing, you know, the funds that we have as an open source entity, you know, through the CNCF, to make sure that we're really investing those dollars to make sure that we're really getting into kind of the highest impact questions that we need to be answering as a project.
And I think it's a good segue to what Francesco will show next. I think for both self-assessments, it really started as a kind of a diagramming exercise, right? Is ad hoc, but that was helpful.
I mean, that just gets down to you can't secure what you can't see and what you don't know, and so you really gotta map it out. You gotta map out the attack surface.
And with that, I think that's a good segue. Francesco will show the diagram that this methodology is produced, and then maybe go into some of the details of each of those assumptions, threat actors.
Yeah, we can indeed. So again, the components, the foundations, and the threat libraries themselves are important, but nothing works better than a good diagram. And this is the one that we developed. This is also the one we are using within in the working group. We'll zoom in very quickly in a bit. Overall, what you see here is an architecture diagram for control plane and data plane of a cluster, for a self-managed cluster. You have key components as blue circles. You have trust boundaries and security boundaries in a dotted red line. You have threat actors. Again, you'll see better later. You have threat actors as red squares, attack vectors as well as red squares, and arrows to show exactly where those threats can cause damage. And more than that, for the individual components, we have lists of threat objects. So individual Kubernetes, down to the certificate of kubelet, down to the very specific Kubernetes component, show what the threats could be and how, of course, to secure them, right? So maybe we can zoom in now, and I'll go full screen for this. There we go. As you can see at the top here, trust boundaries, whole cluster network, this big dotted red square. You have a cluster control plane data, cluster control plane, cluster data plane. And here you have things, of course, like, you know, the runtime of choice, kubelet, and kube proxy. For the control plane, you have kube controller manager, of course, kube scheduler, the runtime, kubelet, kube API, and kube proxy for the control plane. And here you have etcd, the proverbial crown jewels. Let's follow a potential threat from threat actor number 1. And in our threat model, threat actor number 1 will be called X, Y, and Z. We'll show you in a moment from HackMD. We have a number of attack vectors. The attack vectors, they target specific threat objects, and those are the ones in yellow. And these risks can be mitigated by correctly implementing a number of controls, and those are here in green. And again, we only could put the IDs here, but you have the full list in the library. And of course, just to make sure that incident responders know a bit how Kubernetes works, we also put here some arrows to show the communication paths between individual kube components, because that sometimes is quite useful as well. Do you want to make an example? Or give an example?
From time perspective, maybe we just want to run through some of the specifics of
Yes.
each of these objects. Yeah, let's start with the threat actors. And we're presenting here on behalf of Rory, who couldn't make it today, but he is kind of broken down.
There we go.
Yeah, so he's broken down various aspects of the threat model here, but I think his focus has been on the threat actors. So you've got distribution developers, end user architects and operators, and then I'll just kind of quickly go through this for time. We'll post this in the repo and links to the original as well. But some of the behaviors that you would want to consider for each of these different actors is part of the model that Francesco just showed you. So I think he did a bang up job bringing it down. So there's more than we can talk through here from time, but you guys get the general idea. And then Francesco, do we want to show the objects and assumptions? Yeah. Oh, I'm going to zoom in there.
Again, hopefully you'll be able to read something. Here, just from the repo, list of assumptions we had to take to make sure the scope was manageable, because in threat modeling, there is a risk of the complexity to explode if you don't scope it down. So we had a few assumptions. I'll pick, say, two. Within this model, Kubernetes admission controllers include resource quota, limit ranger, pod security, and image policy webhook. As well as within this model, Kubernetes encryption is implemented via encryption configuration and applies for data at rest only. These are two of the 11 assumptions we took. Back to the threat objects. This gets interesting. Again, this based on experience, based on what we could see out in the field. These are the individual Kubernetes components that may be targeted by threats, if either not configured properly or if left unprotected. I'll take two, maybe more interesting. Yeah, master node etcd's X509 certificates, the master node CNI directories, as well as what could be interesting. X509 certificate for the CA that signed OIDC's web certificate. To the attack vectors, again. And by the way, this library is, of course, is something we keep working on. So as we discover more things, we will further refresh attack vectors. Also, threat modeling is an iterative process, so the group will keep an eye on the ever-evolving landscape, the threat landscape, and update the threat model as required. So I'll take, say, a couple here as well. Malicious actor obtaining a kubeconfig file, therefore impersonating. Legitimately obtain OIDC token with cluster details, or a supply chain attack. It's quite trendy these days. Malicious third-party dependency. So a payload injected, pulling images from somewhere you shouldn't pull from. And then to the controls. Again, we have objects that can be targeted by threat actors, following some attack, leveraging some attack vectors. Controls are there to actually harden the infrastructure. And again, this is just a list. For each control, there are implementation instructions you can access. Focus on Kubernetes admission controllers, as well as implementing control traffic flow. And then focusing on things like, there was an interesting one, which is about integrity of, there you go. Applying file integrity to key Kubernetes components. For example, how many of you keep an eye on the checksum for kubelet for the daemon? It's not something that intuitively you would do, right? But it's something you probably want to, because perhaps somebody can swap the binaries. So the file integrity control is something we advocate for a lot. Doesn't cost a lot to do. You can use open source tools available out there, and is a good detective measure to see if somebody is tampering with critical files or binaries or executables. Right. Back to you, Rob.
I'll just add to this control, because prior to this, we just had a session on policy in Kubernetes, and there's a lot of confusion around what a control is. And in this scope, we're really talking about the technical capabilities, the security capabilities in Kubernetes, and the various subcomponents. And so that derives from the source code, of course, and the design underlying that source code, the configuration options, and some of the config files or artifacts or certificates that have to reside alongside the executables. I wouldn't want to confuse the notion of controls from a compliance perspective. You might have PCI controls or HIPAA controls or NIST 853. However, ultimately the audience for the third-party audit that we did will be these compliance-focused actors who are looking to make a go, no-go or risk determination decision on is Kubernetes safe for my company or my government agency, et cetera. And so I'll just kind of connect these dots by saying you can't really have a good compliance posture if you don't understand the underlying risks. And you can't really understand the underlying risks if you don't understand what are the threats and what are the controls that defend against those threats. And you mentioned detective. You might have some that are more monitor-based and observability of those threats and how the defenses are working. But what we really want to come out of this effort is that there's a framework for Kubernetes itself and the subcomponents to follow that trace between what were my requirements, what threats did I necessarily have to introduce to make something operate and usable and scalable, but let's catalog those threats and risks so that others can then take that and do audits against those and come up with a go, no decision, buy, no buy decision, or a remediation plan or extra controls, manual or otherwise, that they can put in place. So hopefully we get kind of an end-to-end feedback flow going. So I guess in terms of remaining time, I'll just reach out to everyone here. If you're part of the project, if you're part of a sub-project, or even a CNCF project, and you would like to engage in this process, we'd welcome you. We're having this discussion under the SIG security group. If there's enough interest, then we'll definitely be happy to spin up a formal work group and file a PR for that, and then we have the repo that Francesco and Abdullah have provided. We will probably fork that and merge that into either SIG security or a possible work group repo. But we'd love to have your participation, and we'd love to allocate some time. I know Ala and I have discussed office hours, both in terms of virtual and at these types of events, where Ala, you've led some hands-on threat model exercises. So I'd love to invite everyone to show their enthusiasm and either attend SIG security or attend some of Ala's self-assessment sessions, and we'll try to adapt this methodology to fit what you all are facing as contributors. So I think do we have any time for questions?
We have plenty of time for questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I would like to open it up to questions if folks have them.
One second.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Micah. I'm on the SRC. This is awesome. Are there anything that you found in this threat modeling exercise that we don't actually have a great control for? It's not necessarily vulnerability, but it's here's a sort of systematic weakness, right? Or maybe we have only one and we want more than one, or we want a stronger one. Is there anything that you found like that, again, this is not saying it's a security issue, but just, has that been part of the exercise, I guess? Or is it just more kind of documenting, here's all the things that are in place today?
Yeah, I mean, Francesco, you can speak if you guys found anything in doing this exercise. I think where we've gone as a very small group so far as just get to agreement on the basic structure. We haven't actually, next on the agenda would be to run through this with specific components and go through the diagram and expand on that. And one of the things I've put in the fork README is that we may actually stumble upon some vulnerabilities, and we're going to put a couple of lines on the embargo policy, if you will. So I would expect, I don't know if you've found any yet, Francesco, but I expect we will.
I hope you do.
Well, I'll be happy to share a few details, but not while they're recording. So I'll meet you outside.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I guess sort of follow-up question, like, or I just thought maybe is it'd be really fun to integrate like once you have this threat model in place, you can start to do things like attack tree diagramming to think, okay, here's what the goal is. I think this is super helpful for, like, from the SRC side, for our bug bounty program to go to researchers and say, here's our threat model. Like, here's not just our list of big assets, but here's our threat model. Like, prove that it's wrong or where it's broken. So
we open sourced a number of attack trees back in 2019, James, I think it was, for the CNCF, the Financial Services User Group. Those need refreshing, but when that will happen, will be under this new initiative. So attack trees will be definitely refreshed as well.
Does anyone have any questions? We have a few more minutes. Cool then.
I'll just jump off of the other SRC comment. Like, I hope you find cool things and then follow the already existing disclosure process if they're really cool.
What's the already existing disclosure process?
Security at Kubernetes.io.
I will make sure that is added to the PR for sure. But we did put some initial thought on that following the embargo and not releasing things.
Makes sense.
Last call. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, cool.
I'm curious if the wide variety of ways to deploy Kubernetes made it difficult to come up with like a threat modeling. Like the diagram you showed sort of had one, like a self-hosted model, but there's as many ways to deploy Kubernetes as there are people deploying it. I'm curious if someone isn't deploying it exactly that way, can they still use like parts of that?
Go ahead.
Well, there is the initial scope includes components that, unless you do a managed Kubernetes, are going to be there. So I think there is a significant, I'm sorry for this screen keep blocking. It provides a very useful initial guidance for you. Of course, based on the way you deploy and operate Kubernetes, there may be more stuff, but I say there is the vast majority of the controls, the assumption, and the threat objects, they are common to most clusters. Then maybe the individual control implementation is down to you how you do it, and that's why we kept controls at a high level of abstraction. You do it in a number of ways, whatever your company employs to implement the control. But I think most of it is reusable for most implementations.
Well, and I'll just add that I think that's where the assumptions part feeds in, underpinning how you then instantiate the objects and the attack vectors. So the idea being that this is an instantiation of the schema, and then yes, as we go through additional iterations of this, we'll instantiate out maybe scope-specific assumptions, scope-specific threat attacks, threat objects, threat actors, etc. And then we probably have to have maybe a scope field in the schema, but that's where I think this is. Once you've got the threat model as code, if you will, now we can run iteratively through multiple exercises. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be one size fits all Uber threat model for everything. It's more you can slice and dice it and regenerate the threat model, pinning whatever assumptions you want to pin.
Yeah. But it's a great point, but unfortunately assumptions are necessary for a threat model. But to give an example, if you, for example, use a specific CNI implementations, kubeproxy isn't even there. So automatically you sort of, cross, like those threats don't apply to me because that component doesn't even exist, right?
I'll just add one more comment. And again, in like government, you would want to scope in insider attack, right? So you're going to have another set of assumptions, some reuse of these, but additional assumptions that expand the scope. So.
One more?
Sorry, just one more thing. Yeah, when we first initially met, sort of thinking about like the vertical use cases, so Robert just mentioned government, that's a way that we could, potentially, again, this is like the 0th iteration of us even doing this, is having, a set of assumptions for like, oh, if you're, a financial company or whatever, pick these 5 assumptions, based on, the aggregated expertise of what we see as a community. We can also offer those suggestions to sort of say, okay, pick this yellow brick road or pick this blue brick road or whatever and off you go. So
100%.
I have a question for Ala.
Yes.
Is there anything that if people were interested in helping with threat modeling Kubernetes components or anything under that banner, how could people get involved?
That's an excellent question. I would recommend hitting up either the SIG security channel in Slack or the, SIG security assessments channel as well, if you're interested in getting involved in this. And yeah, we can loop you in to the meetings that Robert has been hosting for this effort specifically, and also just generally joining the SIG security Google group. That will get you invites not just to the SIG security meeting, but also to the self-assessments sub-project meeting, which is every other week as well, which is where I am and like to keep the community posted and welcome people who are interested in this area as well.
One more?
Oh, one more. Okay. We have time.
What's SIG security self-assessment?
Oh, good question. SIG Security Self-Assessments is the sub-project in SIG Security that is responsible for doing lightweight threat models of different parts of Kubernetes. Right now, we're currently focused on the vSphere CSI driver effort. For those of you who were here earlier today, I did a quick pitch asking for help with that effort. And yeah, if you're working on a part of Kubernetes that would be interested in having a self-assessment, definitely hit us up in the SIG Security or SIG Security Assessments channel in Slack.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesco,
Thank
Robert, and Ala. And thank you all for joining.
If I may, I'd like to leave you with a free book, or half of the free book. This is Hacking Kubernetes, written by our CEO, Andy Martin, and edited by O'Reilly. If you scan the QR code, you can download for free the first half of the book. And this is a gold mine of information on how to defend, as well as break into Kubernetes clusters. So, please. Thank you. Thank you very much.